Welcome to Having Better Breathers, American Lung Association. What we're going to do, and if you notice we started taping, is that if you can't make the meetings, we will have them off the Lake Havasu Foundation website, so you can just see what the presentation. Yeah. Down the fall and into the winter. Next month we'll have Kasim Sheikh, and the month after that Heidi Verdeen, and in December Scott Cool, who's the three pulmonologists here in town. And what we're going to do with this program is try to bring you the most recent, best information that is out there. Last month, we brought in a world famous lung transplant person. So that's the level that this is going to be. And our hope is that we can bring you the best information that's available on the treatment and rehabilitation of COPD. Information by itself is really pretty useless. We also want to kind of give you the framework to really install some new, really survival habits within our life. Because I wake up every morning and I just turn into me. And some of the things that I do aren't particularly beneficial to me. And they're just habitual. I mean, I will do the same things today. I mean, I'll go to the same place at the same time, probably 50% of the time every day. And probably 95% of the thoughts I have today, I'll have tomorrow, and we're habitual. So what we want to do is give you an opportunity to create your own treatment plan, and to give you kind of a place where you can kind of master it. And hopefully out of that kind of get a purpose for your disease. I never thought having a disease could be fun. I mean, that wasn't even on the radar, all right? But that isn't the way it's turning out. What we want to do is give you kind of a place where you can, an old piece of wisdom is take your greatest liability and turn it into your greatest asset. And that's what we're going to try to help you do. Take what really is not a very good thing and turn it into a good thing, all right? Which is a cute little trick. And the wisest people on planet Earth, that's what they've done. So we're going to kind of experiment with that. Today we have Herb Macey, who's been around town here forever, and he is still loved and respected, which says a lot for Herb.
Still breathing.
And Herb is a PA, and he's ran several practices here in town for doctors when they've had to leave. And he is a Special Forces medic, and very well trained, and has had cancer for a long time. That's kind of what our connection is. We both had cancer years ago. And Herb should not be here today. By all odds, he should be absolutely gone. Poof, smoke. All right? But with tenacity, really, and exercise, predominantly, and some other things, Herb is still with us and able to tell us his story. I really appreciate him coming here, and he has a heck of a story, and hopefully we can glean something out of that. Thanks, Herb, for coming.
All right. Thank you. So I think I like informal discussions. This group size is I'm comfortable with. Much bigger than this. And Ed told you I was in the Special Forces. We always operated in about a 12-man team. So I get around more than 12 people. I start looking over my shoulder, wondering who everybody is. So in the process of growing up, I had a World War II father that was came out of the Depression era, and he had me out in the woods in all kinds of situations, on the ocean, taught me to water ski when I was 9 years old outside the Golden Gate Bridge, and I was screaming help and he was saying just don't let go. So that's kind of how I got my start in survival, was being in my family. But like many of you, and I see that our age group is relatively similar, I came along through a time period when it was a great time to grow up. We were involved in sports and activities and outdoor life. We didn't have computers and a lot of the trappings of modern day. So I thought it was just a great time to grow up, until about the mid-1960s, when I was in high school and I saw what was going on in the world and recognized that at some point as a young man I may have to interface with that. And so right away my high school counselor said, you ought to consider the Army. And I said, you're out of your mind. I can read a newspaper and I have a pretty good idea what's going on. So I, like a lot of people, I went to college, and I was going along in college, and I had decided I was going to graduate in communications, and I was going to be working on the other side of a camera and the production end of television. I even worked at a public radio and television station. So that was my dream. And then I recognized that my draft board had another dream, and it was called the lottery, which I won the lottery. And I spoke with them, and they said, you won't be here in a month, you'll be in basic training somewhere. So given that scenario, I decided I need to do something about this. I had friends coming back from Vietnam, one that was my best friend in high school, seriously injured, and he said, if you let them draft you, you'll be a target in 90 days, which was not comforting, but he also advised me that if you get with good people, things go better, because they're vested in surviving. They've been around. Some of them have been there before you, and they have ideas and concepts that you can learn from. And sure enough, one of the very first people I met in the course of being tortured in the Army, they don't just give you a Green Beret. You know, it's not like the movies at all. They want to see if they can kill you, and then if you still survive, then they think, well, maybe we'll do it again. So I ran into an old soldier who said to me, you look like you'd like to make it. And I said, well, yes, Sergeant, that would be me. And he said, well, just remember, young men go to war and they die, and God and medics don't change that. And at first I was thinking of the cynicism of the times, and I was thinking, oh, that's great news. You know, you're telling me I'm going to die? Well, what he was telling me that I came to understand later was the big picture was, if you'd really like to make it, that's what he started with. Remember, you don't get to change everything. But your best chance is just to focus on being what you're supposed to be doing and getting better and opening yourself to greater understanding. And then you'll have a better chance. Or you may die, but you might as well enjoy the ride, sort of. So that did actually ease my mind a little, because I focused more on then staying in all these training increments to become a Special Forces combat medic, which is a long school, which was part of my strategy to not get killed, right? Is go to the longest school they had and get information and get around people with experience. How many of you are suffering with COPD?
All of us.
Right. And the rest of you are too, because you're dealing with it. And just like my family deals with the issues that I have in my health. So the other little, besides that they tossed it out of airplanes in the middle of the night in strange places, you know, it really came to challenge what you were thinking about survival. So having been through a bunch of that, you know, and kind of going through the physical and the mental challenge of that kind of survival, new challenges came into my life, and I always thought I was preparing for war all the time, and in fact I was. But one time I was being promoted to a senior non-commissioned officer. Not a big deal, but it kind of is, because in the order of things you could be in charge of people. And I went through a review board, and it's like an evaluation for those of you who have never been to one, but there's a bunch of people sitting around that are usually commanders, and they have questions for you. And those questions are based on the information that you've been given about proper conduct. And so one of the questions, now mind you, by then I'd already become a Special Forces soldier, was, at what point do you surrender your troops according to the Geneva Convention? And I thought, I don't know. And then I thought, well, I'm not telling them that. So I just looked at the highest ranking guy in the room in the face, and I go, never. And he kind of nodded his head a little bit, and it ended, and they said, well, we want to tell you did real well, but Colonel so-and-so would like to ask you again about that. And I said, well, I'd never surrender. Airborne, and now I'm realizing I probably made a mistake. And he said, well, actually there is a time when the odds are completely overwhelming and you're in charge, and you're going to save the lives of those that you're in charge of. You may have to surrender under the Geneva Convention. That was the question. What I didn't understand at that time in my mind, because I was that kind of impulsive, more impulsive, combat soldier, was there's a difference between quitting and surrendering. And when we surrender to that which is, we have a much better chance of surviving. Sometimes it's measured in time, but mostly it's measured in quality. So today, as I prepared to talk to you, I made 3 pages of notes while I was living out my dream, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And I tore them all out because I realized I was going to talk about a lot of details that I didn't think were necessarily pertinent to what you know about me. And I can kind of get a sense of who you are. Some of you I actually know. But one of the things I've learned from Dr. Wignall here, I met him out on the bike trail while I was exercising several years ago, as he is exercising, going the other way, walking, and I'm riding the other way. He would always say to me, give me a little bit of information, say, get it? You get it? So I just want to say, I get it. And those bits of information have been very useful things, like if it's not fun, don't do it. And what are you going to do with that? What are you going to turn that into? And I accepted those things because I feel that they have value. And I also feel like maybe I've demonstrated that in some way, maybe even unknowingly, with my own journey. So I brought you up to date. I'm 46 years old. I'm living in Lake Havasu City. I'm a PA with experience. I'm at the top of my game. I have 5 children. I live here in town. I ride a bike to work every day. I go to the gym on the island, and I run the island. And I play racquetball 3 times a day, and I love to water ski, scuba dive, and surf.
I'm exhausted.
And I love to play racquetball. And then in the midst of all that intensity in my life, I started feeling not so well. And this comes on the heels of a little hint of information that I got. We had a young lady here in town whose mom worked at McCulloch with you. She had leukemia, and the town was coming together, donating our blood. Who could help? She's going to need a bone marrow transplant. So I went to help, and then my blood got rejected. That combined with not feeling well and sweating at night and getting extremely fatigued and finding out that I couldn't do what I've been doing. And I thought, well, I need to do something more. So I did blood work, basic blood work, that I recommend everybody get on a regular basis. And that showed my white blood count at 28,000 something, when yours is 4 to 8 right now. So you should be about sitting here. And so I investigated that and went through the normal procedures of talking to an internist and then having bone marrows, which were real common then. Had a couple of those, and talked to a wonderful pathologist we had here at the hospital at the time, Dr. Snell. And the conclusion was, you most likely have leukemia. So we want you to see a cancer specialist. Well, in 1995, we didn't have one in Lake Havasu City. Fortunately, that and pulmonology and cardiology and a lot of other things have come a long way, and I so admire our medical community today. But at the time, it was limited. So I started seeing an oncologist, and he basically told me, yeah, this is you're smart enough to know what this kind of leukemia is like. And so I wasn't getting any better, and the numbers were crawling up. And then I developed a lump on my neck. So I called his office and said, his Phoenix office, and said, what do I do? And they said, get that lump out. So I got the lump out by a local surgeon, and the news came back, now you have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I'm pretty worried, and I go back to see this oncologist who only was able to come here like every 3 months as long as it worked out for him, he was a nice guy, but when I talked to him the next time, he said, well, yeah, that's what happens with leukemia is you get lymphomas. And you're smart. You can see what the life expectancy, what they call the 5-year expectancy is. That's a medical term for how long who's going to be around in 5 years, right? And I thought, yes. And I walked out the door, and as I walked out the door after saying yes, I said, no, I am not doing it this way, because I have things to do, and I have plans to make. But yet I was like everybody else. Like the day somebody told you, well, you actually have COPD, or I think you'd be better off with oxygen at this point, or here's your new inhaler, try this. It's a chronic disease. Now, I don't have COPD, but I've been shot at and hit, let me tell you. Not only did I manage to get the leukemia, I also managed to have some upper extremity injuries that were absolutely debilitating from an accident. And then I managed in 2009 to break my neck in 11 places while surfing, So being an old guy who wasn't really ready to give up surfing, I got hurt seriously. So living through all that has kind of reminded me of those previous days I talked about, those survival days, and what I needed to do. So the survival skills I'd like to leave you with is when you find yourself in a situation that's either degrading or a new onset, because how many of you here also have another diagnosis with COPD? Of course, those are called comorbid things. So, also in 2009, I was diagnosed with a third type of leukemia, myelogenous leukemia, which I currently take medication for on a daily basis with the help of the government and everybody else to get these expensive medicines, which I'm sure you can all relate to. So the first thing that I remembered was when I was dropped out of that airplane and I landed, I'll use the Nevada desert, that was one of them, in an area that is known as Skull Valley because it's full of nerve gas that was stored there. And lo and behold, sheep are dying everywhere. They think some of it might be leaking. But with the wisdom of the United States Army and Special Forces, they thought, well, this would be a really good test to see how they do in this environment. So I was dropped out of there about 3 o'clock in the morning, and they had packed our packs for us because they were going to let us know what we needed. And we had 2 canteens of water. And we hit the ground in the middle of the night, and we did the first step, which was stop. get orientated, number 2. So we're orientated. Where's north? Where's south? How long have we been in that airplane? How many turns did we make? We didn't have that information. And then we got ourselves to off that drop zone to what we thought was a little more secure area, and we went to the next step, which was to survey our assets. Does any of this sound familiar when you're having health challenges? Kind of should. Survey your assets next. So, take everything out of the pack. Well, they cleverly put rocks in our packs because they figured 50 pounds of rocks and then atropine syrettes. Anybody who knows what those are, that's a drug that's given by a shot in the leg for nerve gas. It's the only antidote for nerve gas. So they figured it out that that would be the only thing that we actually wouldn't be able to produce on our own somehow. So we went from that step into the next step, which is secure a safe place and make a plan. Come up with a plan. And when you get the plan, remember that the plan can change and it can adjust, but plan it and then do it. When I was a scuba diver, they used to have a term for that, and they'd say, plan your dive and then dive your plan. You won't get you'll have a lot better chance of surviving your day in the ocean if you have something in mind, you know. So developing a plan, to me, is the next thing. The assets, again, even though that's all we had, that's not all we had. And so we have assets in this community, and I just mentioned our medical community. We are blessed to have them, and especially in pulmonology, to have 3 pulmonologists in this town that are all excellent, all practicing. You know, I mean, that's a great thing. We need them, and we're really lucky to have them because we haven't always had it that way here. So we have that as a huge asset. Then you have the people that are sitting next to you, your wives, your family, your children, your grandchildren. You know, there's that network of family. And then there's a network of community. That's why we're here now. That's why I like doing this kind of a thing, is because my dream growing up in medicine, starting out, you know, really as a PA when PAs were, nobody knew what we were, and now everybody knows, everybody has one and knows one, or a nurse practitioner, right? So we were kind of forging that along. So it wasn't a money-making proposition in the beginning by any means, but fortunate to have gotten to this point. You know, I'd like to give it back. Well, people say to me, what would you do? What are you going to do when you retire? I said, well, I'd like to do this for free, you know, and kind of arrogantly, and realizing I wouldn't have to get cancer, break my neck, and have my arm ripped off my body in order to get that dream. But it really is a great thing because, like Ed mentioned in the beginning, our adversities become our strengths when we look at them. We get to pass it on. We get to talk to others about how this happened to us, what we're doing to stay well. You know, John, you met John over in the gym working out on the treadmill with his oxygen, and he still goes there every day. And you know, he's a survivor. And by the way, what is a survivor? Do you know? I learned this right here in this foundation. And the way I learned it was having gone through all those things. And initially when I got cancer, I wasn't telling anybody. I never told my parents. My parents never knew. You know, I was keeping that inside me and reaching out to very few people, because what I saw when I explained that to my family was my wife it was very painful for them, you know, for their own fear and for what could happen, right? So that was part of my motivation for surviving too. But you know, all in all, it's been a really good journey, and I've pulled from the past, just like you do, to give to the present. The other thing that you have is your mind, which is a very powerful thing. And Ed is a mind guy, so he can talk more to the mind. But in my simple world, and having gone through these things, I reached out. Some of my assets were studying quantum physics. I mean, what have I got to lose? I've got a halo on. I'm in an ICU unit. I might as well figure out if there's another avenue here that I can take, right? So I studied quantum physics. I worked on my spiritual realm. And for each of you, you define that as you wish. But for me, it has been a driving force in understanding. Ed explains it as finding your purpose. And but the brain is a big deal. If you've still got yours functioning, it's, you know, you want to get the best out of it. So I brought all that reading and studying and going to seminars and things down to this. To really go forward in your life, you have to think greater than you feel. And sometimes we don't feel so good. But we have to think greater than that. And the other truth that I found was, to change the way you feel, you have to change the thought. And when you change the thought, it changes the way you feel. You know, I happen to have neuropathy that really hurts, but it hasn't hurt me once since I've been sitting here with you. Because I'm not feeling what's physically going on, because I'm enjoying your company so much. So I hope that something that we've talked about here triggers that I get it moment for you. and I'm open to comments or exchange of information that any of you have, because I really see your experience is very valuable to me. And every one of you that I know, and the ones that I don't yet, I had lunch with you not long ago, and I found out he's a scientist. He's not kidding around. He lived in the Palomar Observatory and gazed at the stars, you know. And I had trouble with new math. So, thank you guys for indulging me in the time.